We are entering into another session from the chapter of sources of business finance, and in this chapter we will be discussing about another source of borrowing, another source of fund which is a borrowed fund, and we will be discussing about two sources. One is commercial bank and another one is financial institution. Even though both are doing almost the same thing, there is a slight difference in the working of it. So, we will see in detail about these sources of fund. First one, we will discuss about commercial banks. Now, what is a commercial bank? Commercial banks are financial institution which deals in money and is governed by Banking Regulation Act of 1949. We have already learned that. Commercial banks are those institutions which are dealing in lending and borrowing of fund and accepting of deposits, and which in turn is being extended as loans to the business. That's what we are going to. It is important as it provides fund for different purposes as well as for different time periods. It becomes a source of fund for business because it is providing funds as loans to firms in different ways for different time periods and for different purposes, various ways in which they are extending loans. That is why commercial banks are considered as a source of business finance. They can provide it as cash credit, they can provide it as overdraft, they can provide it as discounting of bills, and they can provide it as term loans and much more. So, it is considered as a source of business because it is extending funds, it is extending loans to business firms to meet its requirements, and it cannot be considered, bank loans cannot be, bank credit cannot be considered as a permanent source of fund because we have to follow a number of criteria, we have to follow certain restrictions, we have to undergo a lot of procedures in order to avail bank loan, and banks provide loans only to those persons, those firms which it finds creditworthy, which it finds have the capacity to repay the loans. So, it cannot be considered as a permanent source. If everything is satisfactory, banks will extend the loans. So, commercial banks become a source of funds in the way that it is extending loans, extending amounts, extending funds for different purposes for different time periods in number of ways. Now, coming on to the merits, provides timely assistance to business. If a business is creditworthy, if business is fulfilling all the conditions, it provides funds when it is required. When it is required, business firms can apply for loans and the bank will be providing it. So, in that way, it provides timely assistance. When the requirement of funds are there, banks will extend the loans. Second one is confidentiality can be maintained because the working of business, the details of business which is taking advances, which is taking loans from banks will not disclose the details given to anybody else of the firm. So, in that way business secrets or confidentiality can be maintained when bank loans are considered as a source of fund. Third one is formalities are less, so is an easier source of funds. Except some paperwork, formalities are comparatively less when compared to other sources of business finance. So, here it is an easy source of fund. Flexible source of fund. Flexible source of fund because they can, it is flexible source of fund because amount can be increased and it can be repaid faster. It can be increased and it can be repaid faster if it is not in requirement. So, in that way there is a flexibility. If bank understands bank is having an idea regarding a business firm as a creditworthy firm, has the capacity for repayment of financial standing, then bank will be ready to increase the amount, and the firm, when it has enough and more finance, they can repay it before the due date. In that way also flexibility is there. So, that is another merit. Now, coming on to limitations. Limitations, basically it is that it is available for short periods, comparatively shorter periods, or maybe we can say medium periods. This bank loans are available, and at times there are a lot of formalities. So, extension and renewals, most of the time it is difficult. Most of the time the extension or renewal can be difficult because procedures are much more. Second one is detailed investigation made by bank about business and procedures delays the funds, because before giving loan, bank conducts in detailed investigation into its financial standing, more working, the persons, the scope, everything, every aspect of the business is analyzed in detail. So, many a time what happens is that after all this investigation, and only when bank is satisfied with this investigation, bank will provide loans. So, such a thing can delay the payment or receipt of funds, because it will take a lot of time to receive funds. It can delay the funds. And the third one is, at times conditions and restrictions imposed by banks trouble normal business working, because banks, as it is giving loan to ensure repayment, to make sure that repayment is made, bank may come up with certain restrictions, certain conditions regarding payment of dividends, or regarding investment, other investments, all those things. There can be restrictions, there can be certain condition imposed on the firm which is taking loan. So, that can trouble the normal working. So, that is also another limitation. Now, we were talking about bank loans. Now, similar to that, there is one more source of business finance, that is financial institutions. Financial institutions. Financial institution differs from bank because these financial institutions are basically established for supporting the business activities. It is established by central as well as state government. Most of the time central or state government can come up with this kind of institution. That is another source of fund. It is not continuation of commercial banks, it is another source of fund, funds from or loans from financial institution, and these financial institutions can be started by central government or state government, and these are supplementing commercial banks. Commercial banks go in a way, and these are other sources which are supporting, which are going or giving an extra benefit, or these are providing funds other than commercial bank. That is why it is supplementing. It is giving in addition to commercial loans from commercial banks. Firms can take loans from financial institutions also. It provides owned capital and borrowed capital for long as well as for medium period. That is a major difference. It provides owned capital. It may purchase the shares, at the same time it can give us loans also. So, and basically difference from commercial bank is that these institutions are providing for long-term requirements, which commercial banks usually doesn't do. Commercial banks is usually giving for shorter periods, whereas financial institution which is established for this purpose, they are providing for long term as well as medium periods. And these kind of institutions are established by central government or state government basically to promote industrial development in the country, and because of that reason these kind of financial institutions are called as development banks, because it is contributing to the development of industries in the country. And examples are State Industrial Development Corporation, SIDC, Industrial Finance Corporation of India, IFCI and all. So, these are some of the examples. And coming on to the merits. First merit is what I have said. It provides long-term finance because industries will start getting back earnings after some time only. Immediately we cannot expect a high return to come in. So, usually it requires long-term loans. So, these institutions, financial institutions provide long-term finance, or it is a source of long-term finance. Second one is, along with the providing finance, this financial institution, as I have said, it is for helping the development of industry in country. It also provide a financial, managerial and technical advice and consultation. Along with providing funds, it also necessary advices, necessary consultation facility is being given by these banks to the business organizations. Third one is increase goodwill of company in capital market, because if a financial institution is to give loans to any business firm, that means that business firm is fulfilling almost all the criteria which is put forward by financial institution. That means it is in a good position, or it is following certain standards. So, that means that business institution can be trusted. So, in that way it increases the goodwill of company in the capital market. Another thing which can be said along with that is it can raise funds from other sources also. It can raise funds from other sources also, because the goodwill can help it. Fifth one is burden is less, as repayment can be made in installments. Even though larger sums are given for longer periods, installments repayment can be made. So, the burden of company will not be more, it will be comparatively lesser. They do not have to pay back in lump sum, whereas when we look at the commercial banks, they may demand in lump sum. But here installments are given according to the company's characteristics and the financial institutions policies. Last one is, these institution, as it is established by central and state government, can be expected as a source even during the time of depression, where other kind of financial sources cannot be expected or trusted. This one can provide necessary funds. So, these are some of the merits of financial institution. Coming on to limitations, they follow rigid criteria and too many formalities. As I have said, financial institution, as it is a government institution, it has certain criteria which is unchangeable, which is difficult to change, and of course, a lot of formalities will be there, lot of fulfilling certain formalities will be there. So, it is a major limitation. And second one is, it is expensive, as there is a lot of formalities to be completed and rigid criteria is there. We have to make sure that everything is up to the mark. So, we have to spend a lot of money to make sure that at the same time it is time consuming also. That is another problem. Third one is restriction on powers of borrowing company. This financial institution put restrictions regarding dividend payment, regarding investments, all these things. There can be restrictions put forward by financial institutions, which in turn can trouble the company's normal working, and nominees of financial institutions can be appointed, and they may come into when company is using certain powers, they can interrupt, or interruptions can be created by nominees which are given by the financial institutions, which can in turn can trouble the usage of power in the business organization. So, we have seen two more borrowed source of fund, that is commercial banks and financial institutions.